Our speaker is Doug Campbell. Doug is running, one of the people running for U.S. House of Representatives from Delaware to fill Mike Castle's seat.
It's not Mike Castle's seat.
I'm sorry. I mean, the seat being vacated.
People say.
We have to have some laughs here. Okay, Doug says he is a constitutional conservative and he believes our way of life is under attack. I guess we all agree with that, huh? Okay. Welcome, Doug.
Did I take some?
All right, how we doing tonight? My name is Doug Campbell, and I am one of the Constitution Party candidates for the U.S. Congress, the seat currently held by Mike Castle, and I'm hoping Christine beats him in the primary. I was going over this information last night with the Kent County group, and I realized that there's so much that goes into all this to understand. My primary thing is going to be on the financing, the banking, to take down the Federal Reserve, because that is where 95% of the problems of this country, originated. So we're going to go through this all together. If you guys have questions as we go along, just raise your hand, and we'll stop and go through this stuff. The federal government has overstepped its bounds by given to it by the Constitution. The Constitution is the contract that we, the people, have with our government. We allow them to do certain things at the federal level, which is supposed to protect the life, liberty, and property of the people. These things are contained in the Articles of and the Amendments to the Constitution. The rest of the lawmaking and regulation is left to the states. This has been so over-violated with the legalized bribery they call mandates and subsidies. The states have become a federalized conglomerate of bankrupt jokers, overtaxing their citizens, selling worthless bonds that will have to be bailed out, all while begging the feds for more money to pay for worthless services that harm more people than they help, and to pay for public projects that end with private profit, all full of corruption, bribes, kickbacks, fraud, all on the taxpayer's dime. The micromanaging of our states by Washington is destructive and illegal.
Hear, hear.
It's the cozy relationship between the bankers and the politicians that have facilitated the debt culture that we have now. The Federal Reserve, a private bank, has the power to create money out of thin air by loaning money backed by treasury bonds, which is the nation's debt. They can loan 10 times the amount, and these are actually old numbers. Some of these banks are now loaning 30-to-1 against the treasury bond. So $1 in treasury bond, they're loaning out $30 in loans. This is called fractional reserve banking. As the Treasury sells more bonds to the Federal Reserve and other major banks, they can then make more loans. When these loans go bad and the people can't pay, the bank is bailed out by the federal government and the taxpayer. The taxpayer's been bailing out banks since the 70s. It's been incremental, it's been a little bit here, a little bit there, but if you look at, the first bailout was a couple million, then they did a couple $100 million, and now it's up into the billions and trillions. The FDIC is insolvent. Its ability to pay the depositors is dependent on the Fed's willingness to create more money. Most of our money isn't actually printed. It's created by the billions with keystrokes on a computer. This expansion of the money supply by the major banks in the Federal Reserve System creates inflation, which is a hidden and extremely destructive tax on the people because it destroys the purchasing power of the dollar. It is a tax on everything that you have ever saved and everything that you will ever earn in the future. The amount of money that has been created by the Federal Reserve since the passage of the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, by Bush with the support of Mike Castle and Tom Carper, this thing is bipartisan, amounts to a declaration of war on the dollar and total financial terrorism against the people. Most all the income tax goes to the interest on the bonds held by the bank who created the money from nothing. The politicians either don't understand how this works or are fine with it because they benefit from the campaign contributions given by these banks. The banks who receive the bailouts are also compensated by the AIG bailout. AIG is simply the insurance policy for Wall Street gamblers. They have squandered most pensions and investment funds by investing in overpriced mortgage-backed securities that were essentially mandated to fail by Congress because banks could loan the appraised value instead of the market value without any documentation of income or ability to pay the loan. We can thank Barney Frank and Chris Dodd for those. With the fall of Glass-Steagall Act, our savings deposits are now being gambled on things like derivatives. They are completely made up financial instruments backed by nothing and doomed to failure, more bailouts, and national debt. The entire system works on the basis that the depositors won't want all their money at once. The banks only hold between 1 and 10% of the deposits in cash. When banks take your deposit, they loan it out. It becomes a deposit in another bank or in the same bank. 10 times the amount of that deposit can then be loaned out. And remember, these are old numbers. It could be 30 to 1 now, depending on the size of the bank. These loans are backed by this deposit, which is actually someone else's debt. The cycle repeats itself over and over again, leading to massive inflation. The banks responsible for this financial terrorism include Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, and Barclays, all of which are members of the Federal Reserve System and contributed to Financial Committee member Mike Castle in 2008. Why wouldn't he vote for TARP? He is being paid to protect the banks. This is the same story all through Washington. If you look at the committees that these congressmen serve on, you will find their largest campaign contributors come from the multinational corporations they are charged with regulating. The FDA and Monsanto, Google those two things. Congressmen can also engage in insider trading, of which Martha Stewart went to prison for. These are just two examples of the legalized bribery our congressmen and senators, and it must stop. When the banks come to Washington asking for bailouts, they threaten Congress with systemic failure, massive bank loss, and during the TARP hearings, even martial law. These are the banks that have robbed our savings, gambled our pensions, inflated the dollar, and now the system is failing because of the bad investments and obscene bonuses paid to these crooks and their ilk. Criminal indictments should include Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, Henry Paulson, Timothy Geithner, Larry Summers, Robert Rubin, and David Rockefeller.
Amen.
U.S.
Vice President.
The list is so long, I just tried to keep with the main target figures. The easiest ones to go after. U.S. members and attendees of the Bilderberg Group should be charged under the Logan Act, which include Bill and Hillary Clinton, Larry Summers, Sandy Berger, Chris Dodd, Kay Bailey Hutchison, Rick Perry, and Bill Richardson. These are all people who supposedly work for taxpayers who go off to massive ivory tower type establishments to have secret meetings. And this is the Bilderberg is the top of the pyramid. It is the top of the steering committees and these roundtable groups that actually control the direction of where our government goes. If you look at a list of the attendees of Bilderberg, it's all major financial, media, all heavy industry. Monsanto has been represented. Goldman Sachs is always heavily represented. The central banks of the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England, they are always represented. If you just look at the list, you can see that the fraud is global and it is total.